Senate Judiciary is now in session. We're going to start with SB 55. The prime sponsor is Senator Murphy. Great to see you this afternoon, Senator. How is the shoveling?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's wonderful to be here. I have to say I haven't spent a lot of time in your committee before, but it's wonderful. I did go back to the homeland last week. It was wonderful and hasn't changed at all.
Very good.
Senator Keith Murphy, representing the people of Goffstown, Hooksett, North Manchester, Candy, and Raymond. Mr. Chairman, I have the honor and privilege of living in North Manchester. And Manchester as a community has had, the last several years, just a horrendous problem with needles, used needles laying around on streets, sidewalks, playgrounds, gutters, you name it, it's there. I went for a walk recently. Actually, this was back in September. I've handed out a couple of photos. These were all photos that I took personally, just walking around an afternoon, maybe walked a half mile. Here's one sitting in Stark Park, a little drug needle. And then these next two, the one photo was taken on Canal Street, down in the Mill Yard of Manchester, and the next one was taken off Hampshire Lane, a half block off of Elm Street. And there's a collection there of maybe a dozen needles, and all the prerequisites, all the equipment you need to, someone would need to cook off drugs and inject them. The band, the spoon is there if you look close enough. It's a whole little kit. So I saw this and I thought, why and how does this happen? How are there just randomly thousands of needles laying around the streets of Manchester? So I looked into it. There are organizations that hand out, on average, 1,450 needles every single day in the city of Manchester. And that's just Manchester. I know there's similar programs in operation in Concord, in Rochester, this is in Dover. So, Mr. Chairman, I mean, obviously, again, I'm from Manchester. I see it every day. I hear from my constituents routinely that they are tired of not having their children be able to play in playgrounds without stepping on or around drug needles. Now, these needles are handed out by these organizations ostensibly for the safety of people that use them. Obviously, needles that are used are dangerous, and I understand that. But they're also dangerous for the people who live around those communities that must see them. So there's another bill that's coming later on in the session, Mr. Chairman, that also seeks to address this issue. This bill, 556, essentially makes it a felony for people to improperly dispose of medical waste, including syringes. And currently in statute, it's a felony if it's a company, if it's a non-natural person, but it's a misdemeanor if it's a natural person. If I walk into the men's room or women's room down the hall and I pull the Sharps container off the wall and I walk around the State House indiscriminately shaking that onto the ground, why wouldn't that be a felony? That's the question. This is a serious problem. These are dangerous things with bodily fluids, with drugs on them. Why would we want that to not be a felony? And so what this does is it makes it a Class B felony if a natural person, up from misdemeanor. So, Mr. Chairman, I hope you and the committee can look kindly upon the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senators? Go ahead, Senator Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Murphy, for bringing this forward. And I hear you. This is, and thank you for your photos. Special waste. Perhaps I'm not familiar enough with RSA 149, but where would diapers fit into this, and would that get swept up in this because it would be contaminated from bodily fluids? Or is that addressed somewhere else?
Thank you for the question. If it's not currently swept into it,
yeah,
this bill would not change that. The current statute is special waste means any matter consisting of medical or infectious waste. That is already in the law. And so what this bill does in line 4 and 5 is it
Yeah.
specifies used and unused syringes and similar medical devices.
Thank you thank you for going down that road with me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
No problem. That's the last thing I want is for somebody to get charged with felony because they drop a diaper. Yeah. Mr.
Just
Chairman.
because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's probably not a great question, but I'll ask you anyways. So if I shoot up and I am out of it and I just throw the syringes on the ground, so I didn't knowingly throw them on the ground. I just doing what I'm doing, unaware of my actions. Would he still be guilty of a felony if he didn't know when he's throwing his stuff around? Somebody's high.
So, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. If you look at this photo back here, there's a dozen needles. There were clearly more than one individual. This was a group of individuals that shot up, walked away, and left this on the street for anybody to walk across. I do not believe that being under the influence of a drug in this case is sufficient excuse or absolves someone of responsibility for walking away and leaving this in this condition.
I'm with you, Senator. I'm just thinking what a lawyer might say.
Yeah. No,
The
I mean,
defense
it's,
attorney.
we, none of us excuse people for drinking and driving. They're responsible for their actions under the influence of a drug, alcohol, or anything else.
Works for me, Senator. Any other questions? Senator Reardon? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe there's no one else testifying. Ben Bradley, would you want to testify? No? Okay, just checking. Okay, that'll end the hearing on 5:56.
No, they actually disclose it to the mayor. Yeah, actually, yes. They have descriptions. They have, so they have.
Yeah. You should try singing it as you walk around.
5:12, Senator Murphy's still here. Keep rolling, you're doing great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Keith Murphy representing the people of Goffstown, Hooksett, Candia, Raymond, and North Manchester. Mr. Chairman, this one's a bit of a personal one for me. I'm not sure if anybody here has had the misfortune to be charged with a crime without any basis and when you're completely innocent, but I can tell you that I have. And it's a life-altering event. You know, you spend time in a cell without shoes. Your picture ends up on the front page of the Union Leader. Family 6 states away calls you to say they saw your article. Your mugshot hangs out on the internet for the rest of your life. Every penny that you've saved to buy a house for your family, it's gone. Goes to pay for a defense lawyer. Now, And then it goes to trial, and you get found not guilty. And the system kind of worked as much as the system that we have does. And then, what do you get when you go to annul the record for this? Do you get an apology? Do you get, oops? No, you get told you have to pay $100. I do not understand, and I would really like anybody behind me to explain any basis for requesting money to annul a criminal arrest when there's been no conviction. Is there any basis for that? It is the definition of adding insult to injury. So this certainly doesn't apply to me because in my sad situation, that money's gone. But it shouldn't happen to anybody else. And so I'm seeking to move this bill forward. It simply says that the court shall not charge any fee to file a petition where there has not been a conviction. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
I can't believe it, Senator. We're a committee of few questions today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is anyone from the court here we could call up? Is there no one on the sheet? Okay, that'll end the hearing. What were you gonna? Senator Murphy, you're still here, which is a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Tell me about 462, your bill that you bring.
My congratulations on running such an efficient committee, Mr. Chairman. Keith Murphy, people of Goffstown, Hooksett, Candia, Raymond, and North Manchester. Okay, so I have brought to you the holy grail of bills. It is one sentence long. A qualifying patient's therapeutic use of cannabis in accordance with this chapter shall not affect the individual's right to purchase, possess, and transfer firearms in accordance with New Hampshire law. So my first term in the legislature, Mr. Chairman, was in 2010, and we passed medical cannabis. And over the years, that cannabis legislation, therapeutic cannabis legislation, has been tweaked, fixed, expanded, and really solidified. We have made as a state the policy decision that cannabis can, in certain circumstances, be used as medicine. We do not condition the exercise of basic constitutional rights on medication. And in essence, this one simple one-line bill simply clarifies that the choice to use prescribed cannabis does not impose any sort of restriction or should not result in a restriction on the exercise of the right to purchase, possess, or transfer firearms. Really simple bill. I think it's basic common sense. I think everybody in the room should hopefully support it, and regardless of party. I hope that you can. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Senator. So you're saying that you're using this medical drug and there shouldn't be anything held against you. But there are in other areas, right? If you're driving a commercial vehicle and you tested positive for marijuana use in the last month, don't you lose your CDL license? So don't we treat people differently already in other areas?
In other areas, I can't disagree with that, Mr. Chairman. I think that we do. However, if someone does not test positive, then they wouldn't. I don't think it's right. Owning and carrying a firearm is a basic constitutional right recognized by our state and federal constitutions. Operating a CDL vehicle is not. I think it's, in a way, you're kind of comparing apples and oranges with respect.
Okay. Any questions? Yep, Senator Reardon.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. Is there any place in New Hampshire law that says you cannot own a firearm if you're a medical marijuana patient?
Not to the best of my knowledge. This is a belt and suspenders approach, just to make sure. There are some people behind me, I believe, and I testify for instances that this has been an issue.
Cool, thanks.
Senator Ambus.
I waive my question.
Okay, I think we're all set. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Nathaniel. Good to see you again, sir.
Chairman. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you. Is this working? Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to this bill. First, I think that
If you can state your name for the record.
oh, I'm sorry, pardon me. My name is Nathaniel Gurian. I am the executive director of the New Hampshire Cannabis Party and CEO of NH Cannabis LLC, which provides marketing services to the industry. And I am also a columnist for the Conway Daily Sun covering NH cannabis policy and politics. The first thing is that clearly in New Hampshire, we vigorously guard and protect and the Second Amendment rights of New Hampshire residents. And we make every effort, and I know most elected officials do, to to make sure that if those rights are being infringed, if there's any opportunity to protect them, that we act on that. However, we have, as a state, legalized cannabis in direct defiance of federal law, in which it remains illegal. A number of other states around the country have also, in defiance of federal law, either legalized personal possession or created a framework for medical and/or recreational sales, once again in defiance of federal law. However, people in those states basically enjoy a high level of comfort and safety from federal prosecution by primarily an expectation and experience that the feds will not prosecute. And so people do freely use and buy and sell cannabis in accordance with their particular state laws, irrespective of the fact that no state law can make it unlawful. However, we do have a situation here in which the Second Amendment rights of a substantial number of New Hampshire residents are being infringed, and this bill gives us an opportunity to do something about that. Basically, in the same line as, although this bill cannot override and cannot make the exercising Second Amendment rights, that is to say, possession, transfer, transport, or sale of firearms, federally legal, we can provide a level of protection similar to having some form of legalization of cannabis, and have an expectation that that will provide additional protection and comfort for New Hampshire residents who wish to exercise their constitutional rights. You know, right now we have a very substantial infringement on this just because of the conflict with federal law. And so although we cannot change the federal illegality, we can provide that similar type of protection. The other thing is that when we proceeded roughly whatever it was, 8 years ago, to enact cannabis legislation, or medical cannabis legislation, it was not expecting that there would be any umbrella of protection for New Hampshire residents who participated in the medical cannabis program. Again, it was in defiance of that. And so this bill does not in any way expand the medical program or expand cannabis legalization in any way. It simply provides this additional protection. Now, it's important to note that as a practical matter, even without this legislation, the likelihood of prosecution, I'm sorry, I think I was making the presumption that everyone understood that the ATF has a regulation that says an unlawful user of controlled substances, and in this case, cannabis would be included, are prohibited from purchasing, possessing, and transferring firearms. And in fact, if you go to a licensed firearm dealer and fill out the firearms transaction form number 4473, question 21F, says, are you an unlawful user of cannabis or addicted to it, or to a controlled substance? And it goes on to explain that in the event that your state has legalized it in any form that in no way changes your legal jeopardy. And so it is illegal to do that, and consequently, a lot of folks, have to make a devil's choice between exercising their Second Amendment rights and getting access to medicine, which for many has proved to be a boon in that it has often taken them off dangerous opioids, and they're able to find relief otherwise, and so on. So So basically, the bottom line is that, as a practical matter, there have been very few prosecutions. There have been somewhere over 15 million of the Form 4473 submitted to the NICS criminal background check system in 2025, and there have been approximately 250 prosecutions under that law. So the actual likelihood of prosecution is still very slim, and so this state law would further give people the comfort that they were protected from, legal jeopardy as a result. It's also, I think, important to note that we do have an option of amending the language if this committee saw fit in such a way so that we would also be able to protect people from federal prosecution and interference, but that is another issue and it's not the actual subject of this particular bill. I will mention, however, that there is some breakthrough news that the ATF has just announced last Thursday, in that they have made an alteration which is being implemented immediately within the NICS system, and that is that they have redefined the term unlawful user. What the NICS system and the ATF's policy has been up to this point was if you had a conviction within 12 months and that showed up, or if you had a drug test that there was a record of, or there was any other similar type of evidence of, one single use or occasional use, that you would be denied being able to make the purchase from a firearms dealer. It would come back as a denial. The ATF has just implemented last Thursday a new, what they call interim final rule, which says that that they will not, going forward, reject applications for a single use or for occasional use, and in fact, that they now are only going to reject an application or consider someone an unlawful user if their use can be shown to be habitual, and that they do not have any real control over their use of the controlled substance, and so that they really fit into the category of an addict. What that basically means is that unless there is some documentary evidence that they are a habitual user or they're addicted to cannabis or any other controlled substance, or perhaps they admit that they are, other than that, it would be correct to say that if you were an occasional user of marijuana, you could honestly answer that question on the ATF form that you know you are not an unlawful user by definition. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. You can probably just straighten me out. So are we really not doing anything here? It's a federal law. You're trying to, people are only going to feel good if we pass this state law, because it's still up to the feds to do what they're going to do, which you're telling me they're going to make it a habitual thing. So if we do this today, you're still violating. It's a federal charge that you're violating. There's no state charge against you here, correct? For possessing or transferring, they'd get you because you're violating federal law. And the federal law, which may be in a state of flux right now, hasn't quite changed yet. You're telling me it's like in a court hearing. So am I doing something that really has no effect? Is this just making people in New Hampshire feel good because it's all federal law?
Well, the thing is that, if there happened to not be a law against cannabis, by having a law legalizing some aspect of it, that does give people, that certainly has shown historically that with cannabis, by having a state law that legalizes it and officially states that it's covered and included. Apparently, the feds have taken the position with cannabis, and since this is a cannabis-related issue, likely similar, and because they are also liberalizing this policy by having a state law that specifically provides that protection, that kind of gives us the same coverage as having a cannabis law that says that it's legal to either have medical or whatever we do happen to legalize. So combined with the fact that the likelihood of prosecution is extremely low, we're now going from slim to none. And I will say that I spent a lot of time this summer and fall at county fairs and state fairs talking to a lot of people, and the number one concern that they have, regardless of the low likelihood and in point of fact, it's almost impossible to get prosecuted for this. People have been staying away from entering the medical program because of their concern, and I think that some kind of a statement from legislature would provide comfort and would not increase anybody's exposure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. If this were to become law and a qualified patient who has a therapeutic cannabis card went to a licensed firearms dealer to purchase a firearm, and they nevertheless declined the sale, what would the consequence be for the licensed firearms dealer?
Well, I have to say that the use of the form with a licensed firearms dealer creates a separate and parallel legal jeopardy. And one of the reasons for that is that lying on the form is a separate offense, carrying up to 10 years in jail. I would basically say that this really provided excellent legal coverage and protection for private firearms transactions and ones which did not go to a firearms dealer. And that at this point in time, the happy news for, folks, who, in fact, this would actually affect people who are using marijuana, whether recreationally or otherwise, could rely on this new rule from the ATF that makes it, basically means that unless you're really in the thrall and addicted to the substance, you basically are relieved of the obligation with the ATF and the firearms dealer. I will say also that I had a substantive conversation with a representative of the ATF yesterday. And I asked them a couple of questions. One was, how were they going to communicate this substantial change to the public and the firearms dealers, and whether they were going to change the language on the form. And number two, whether they were, well, basically that. And number two was part of the rule change is that in the event that the cannabis is being used under prescription from a licensed physician, that also, and as long as the person is basically using it within the framework of the prescription, that would also not be an unlawful user. However, he basically said that those two were very good questions and that he didn't want to give me a straight up answer immediately, but he was going to research and get the exact answer back to me on that.
So my question is, becomes law. This only applies to qualified patients. So someone just using recreational cannabis does not necessarily, this has no impact on them.
This has no effect. The only benefit they might have would be on the ATF liberalization.
My question is, could a licensed firearm dealer still decline to make the sale to a therapeutic, a qualified patient if this became law? Based on that reason.
Well, they have to follow the law, and the law doesn't, the new regulation is not going to say that having a patient card is evidence of being an addict.
I'm asking, I understand there's a change at the federal level going on. I'm talking about strictly based on this bill. This became law, and a licensed firearm dealer declines the sale based on the fact that they know you have a therapeutic cannabis card, will there be any cause of action or potential liability to the licensed firearm dealer?
Well, I can't see that there would be. I'm not actually familiar with an appeals process that a purchaser can get into.
You'd still be violating federal law though. Selling
Oh.
that gun.
Well,
To this person who's
well,
using-
in this particular case, no, because since they have much more narrowly defined unlawful user, you either are or you aren't.
Oh, so
And-
they've already done, I thought they were in the process.
Oh, no, this is what they call an interim final rule, and they have implemented this immediately.
Thank you.
However, I didn't get clarification on how they were going to communicate this to FFLs and whether they were going to change the language on the form. But they recognized that they did need to have that information out to purchasers and FFLs. But the bottom line is that is that you would not be, if you are a recreational user or a medical card user, if you don't meet the definition of an unlawful user, then the sale would actually be federally legal.
Very good. Thank you for your testimony. Seeing no other questions, thanks. Mary Cadabridge. She can, just can you check if she's going to come down? Thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Lieutenant Mary Cadabridge. I work for the New Hampshire State Police. I oversee the New Hampshire State Police gun line. We are neutral on this matter. However, most of you have stated everything I was going to state today of rather it is still a federal law that supremacy laws override state laws. With the concern of there is a change of law, it is correct, not a change of law, but a change of guidance on how you look at a user of a non-lawful user. So a medical marijuana card on its face might, but if they're using on a consistent pattern, that is going to be a federal disqualifier. So we're still looking at federal disqualifiers for these events, but you have to prove that pattern, and an FFL still can't sell you a weapon if you click yes to that, because they may be violating federal law and up for whether they lose their license because of that. It's a business issue, and along with being criminally responsible on the federal side of the house on that as well. And this focuses just on individuals purchasing, not necessarily us. We've had a different bill where we can't transfer a weapon as well if they're federally disqualified, because we would be committing a federal offense.
So with the interim order being, the question is, what is a regular user of? If I'm taking something every day,
Right, so
would
if
seem
it's something that's
consistent to
regularly in a
me.
pattern and it has
Yeah.
not stopped, you're still considered an unlawful user. And and for federal law, the therapeutic cannabis has not been passed as a prescription that is acceptable on the Fed
Yeah.
side at this time.
So just on the face of it, to me, it looks like everyone who's getting a weekly, daily, monthly would be a regular user. And that would cover the whole spectrum.
Correct, as long as you
Everyone
can,
getting it?
you
Okay.
have to be able to prove that pattern, yes.
Okay, thank you. Question, Senator Reardon, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. And thank you for being so clear about federal law preempting state law. So we've had some conversation here about what defines a infrequent user as opposed to a regular user. We have no law on the books right now in New Hampshire, so it's not prohibited at this time under New Hampshire law. It's federal law we're talking about. So if we pass this bill or didn't pass this bill, it really makes no difference when you're behind.
Correct.
Thank you.
Senator Atlas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. Although I have some concerns about the licensed firearms dealer and how the Department of Safety may have to implement this, and once it became law, I looked at this and it would apply if I own a firearm and I were to gift it to a family member or a friend who happens to be a therapeutic, patient. I guess in that case, I'm now transferring a firearm to what would, yes, under federal law, I still got to deal with that.
Correct.
But I know the state law, I believe there would be no,
No, because the state doesn't enforce federal laws. So
yes, but
there's no state law that says you can't transfer the firearm. It's all under federal law.
so there's no state law in the state of New Hampshire, if you transfer a firearm to a prohibited person?
For felons. There is for felons.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. No other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to testify on 462? Sure, come on up. Come on back up, Nathaniel.
Last I checked, I'm the same person I was a few minutes ago, so I just wanted to say that the other issue with this ATF new rule is that in the event that somebody is habitually or regularly using a controlled substance under a doctor's prescription, that would not make them an unlawful user. So the question that I asked to him was, because cannabis is currently Schedule III and physicians therefore are not allowed to prescribe it, what they currently do is they recommend, which is, I guess, just a different process, but it's really the same. They recommend that you are qualified to be a medical cannabis patient. However, I questioned whether, especially if, as it appears, we are going to be shortly moving to Schedule III, whether a physician could then prescribe or whether the physician's recommendation at that point would govern. And he said, well, that's a very good question, and I will get you a definitive answer on that.
Thank you. Seeing no other testimony, correct? That'll end the hearing. It's 6:23. Senate Judiciary is back in session. We're going to hear SB 623. Senator Ausserle, take it away.
Okay. Just a moment here. All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Gannon, honorable committee members. For the record, my name is Deborah Altschuler. I represent State Senate District 24, which includes the towns of Exeter, Greenland, Hampton, Hampton Falls, Northampton, Rye, and Stratham. Respectfully, I submit this testimony in strong support of the Granite State No Anonymity in Immigration Enforcement Act. This legislation addresses a matter of fundamental importance to the safety, trust, and constitutional protections of all New Hampshire residents. In the past year, New Hampshire law enforcement agencies have had a rapid growth in the adoption of memorandums of understanding with Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the 287G task force model. On the back of your testimony is a QR code that will link you to the 287G task force model. I submitted this legislation in September. And at that time, the nation had observed this dramatic increase in federal immigration enforcement operations conducted by officers who conceal their identities through face coverings and refuse to display proper identification. This practice has become so prevalent that the Federal Bureau of Investigation issued a nationwide warning in October of 2025 urging immigration and customs enforcement agents to adequately identify themselves due to a surge in criminals impersonating federal officers. This memo from this public safety awareness report from the FBI is also available on the back of your testimony by QR code. New Hampshire has made substantial investments in law enforcement accountability and professionalism. Our state and municipal departments have adopted body-worn cameras, invested in community policing training, and worked deliberately to build trust with all residents. The New Hampshire Police Standards and Training Council has established rigorous standards for officer conduct and constitutional policing. The 2020 Law Enforcement Manual, which is the latest edition, reflects our commitment to transparency and accountability. The 2020 Law Enforcement Manual is also available by QR code on the back of your testimony. This progress represents decades of work by law enforcement leaders, policymakers, and community members. New Hampshire officers have earned public trust by being identifiable, accountable professionals who operate according to clear standards and submit to meaningful oversight. This bill exists to protect our investment. Last year, New Hampshire passed legislation prohibiting municipalities from barring local police departments from applying for or entering into agreements with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to participate in federal 287G programs. This law ensures that departments throughout New Hampshire can participate in immigration enforcement if they choose to do so. However, participation in the 287G program places New Hampshire officers under federal supervision and control. You can see through the QR code to the MOU. The standard MOU agreement states, quote, immigration enforcement activities conducted by participating law enforcement agency personnel will be supervised and directed by ICE. Participating law enforcement agency personnel are not authorized to perform immigration officer functions except when working under the supervision or direction of ICE. And the agreement continues by saying, in the absence of a written agreement to the contrary, the policies and procedures to be utilized by the participating law enforcement agency personnel in exercising these authorities shall be DHS and ICE policies and procedures. This creates a serious problem. When New Hampshire officers participate in a 287G operation, they are required to follow federal policies that have increasingly diverged from the accountability standards that New Hampshire has established. Federal immigration enforcement operations in 2025 are routinely conducted by officers who conceal their identities. According to the Center for American Progress, federal ICE officers conducting operations while, quote, donning face coverings without an agency designation and driving unmarked vehicles, end quote, have become commonplace nationwide. Human Rights Watch documented that ICE agents, quote, now commonly operate masked and without visible identification, describing this as, quote, fundamentally inconsistent with the United States' obligation to ensure that law enforcement abuses are investigated and met with accountability. The past year has seen immigration enforcement operations that raise serious constitutional concerns, including the shooting death of Alex Preddy last Saturday, January 24th, 2026, and the shooting death of Renee Good on January 7th, 2026 in Minnesota by ICE agents. A September 25th, 2025 military-style raid on a Chicago apartment building using Black Hawk helicopters. More than 1,800 arrests in Illinois that potentially violated court-monitored agreements, and the well-documented wrongful detention of U.S. citizens. The International Association of Chiefs of Police, one of the nation's largest police organizations, and we do have members here in New Hampshire, has adopted 2 resolutions focused on immigration enforcement operation. One addresses the dangers of inflammatory rhetoric from influential leaders, and the other warns that when agents cover their faces, it can, quote, create confusion, fear, and mistrust among community members and responding agencies. It is rare for this organization to make such statements, underscoring the seriousness of the accountability crisis in federal immigration enforcement. When New Hampshire officers participate in 287G operations, they are placed under ICE supervision and required to follow ICE policies. Without the protections in this bill, our officers could be directed by ICE supervisors to wear masks to conceal their identities, to order disablement of body-worn cameras that New Hampshire has invested in for accountability, or be required to participate in operations that conflict with New Hampshire's standards for constitutional policing and associated in the public mind with federal operations that have undermined community trust nationwide. This would undo decades of careful work. New Hampshire law enforcement officers have built trust by being identifiable, accountable, professional. When they are swept into federal operations characterized by anonymity and lack of oversight, that trust is jeopardized. Research by the Police Executive Research Forum and the Major Cities Chiefs Association has consistently found that community cooperation is essential for effective policing. When residents fear that any interaction with police could result in immigration enforcement by anonymous, unaccountable officers, they stop reporting crimes, they refuse to serve as witnesses, and they withdraw from civic participation. New Hampshire cannot allow our officers' hard-earned credibility to be compromised by association with these practices. The FBI issued a national warning in October of 2025 because criminal actors are using ICE's enhanced public profile and media coverage to their advantage to target vulnerable communities and commit criminal activity. The bulletin noted that impersonations, quote, make it difficult for the community to distinguish between legitimate officers conducting lawful law enforcement action and imposters engaging in criminal activity. When legitimate officers operate anonymously, they make it easier for criminals to victimize residents. Since early 2025, individuals impersonating ICE officers have committed kidnapping, sexual assault, and robbery across multiple states. New Hampshire departments have invested in body-worn cameras because they serve dual purposes: protecting officers from false accusations and protecting the public from misconduct. The National Institute of Justice found that body cameras, quote, may result in better transparency and accountability, and thus may improve law enforcement legitimacy. Body camera footage is subject to Freedom of Information Act requests, ensuring public accountability. When officers disable cameras during 287G operations, they eliminate this crucial protection at precisely the moment when oversight is most needed. This legislation requires that when New Hampshire officers participate in immigration enforcement under federal supervision, they maintain the accountability standards that define professional law enforcement in the Granite State. This bill requires 3 things. 1, officers must display either their name or badge number. 2, officers cannot wear facial coverings or masks. And 3, officers cannot disable or disengage their body-worn cameras. These are not radical requirements. These are standards that New Hampshire officers already meet in their daily work. This bill ensures they maintain these standards when operating under federal supervision. New Hampshire has invested decades and substantial resources in building accountable professional law enforcement. Our officers have earned public trust through transparency and adherence to high standards, and that trust is a precious asset that enables effective policing and safe communities. The 287G program places our officers under federal supervision and requires them to follow federal policies. Without this legislation, they could be required to adopt practices, masked operations, disabled body cameras, refusal to identify themselves, that are fundamentally incompatible with the accountability standards New Hampshire has established. This bill protects New Hampshire's investment in accountable law enforcement. It protects the relationships our officers have built with their communities, and it protects the constitutional standards that define professional policing in our state. And finally, it protects our officers themselves from being compromised by federal practices that undermine the very trust and legitimacy that make effective law enforcement possible. I respectfully urge the committee to support this important legislation with a recommendation of ought to pass. And I'm delighted to take questions.
Thank you for your testimony. I have a couple questions to start with.
Okay.
So under the 287, the state troopers or the police or sheriffs, it's a voluntary program, right? They're not co-opted or forced to join ICE. They've chosen voluntarily to get involved with that 287 program.
Correct.
Okay. So now you were really clear that you wanted no facial coverings ever. You want the badges displayed. What if they're going after known gang members and then their faces are going to be exposed? Isn't that problematic? May there not be reasons such as that? They don't want an organized crime person to know it was me and I live in this address at this town. And so they're in fear for the lives of the ICE officers, depending on who they're going after.
So currently, we don't have a policy, and and there is a link in the QR code to the New Hampshire protocols. We don't have a policy that allows for our law enforcement to mask up during any execution of a warrant. That's not that we don't do that.
But so if they're operating under ICE or Homeland's orders, and ICE being the professional group coming after, say, a known criminal, rapist, murderer from a foreign country, they're looking to deport them. They know they're a gang member. Maybe they want to protect our officers. If they're exposed, their names and their faces are exposed, a criminal element will then know who the people were, and they'll be, them and their family are put in danger. Wouldn't you be afraid of that?
So I appreciate the hypothetical, and that, and it's not a far-fetched hypothetical because we know that those type of operations do happen. What we don't have is a policy from ICE that delineates that only in those circumstances will ICE use facial coverings. Instead, what we have is them using what we have documented and seen with our own eyes is that they are using facial coverings 90% of the time. So it's not just used for a specific situation like the one you described. And again, just like with the New Hampshire standards and the policy manual that was last updated when Supreme Court Justice Gordon MacDonald was our Attorney General, agencies and states put together policies. They don't wing it. That's not how law enforcement operates. We don't wing it. We have policies, and those policies are designed to create boundaries that keep the public safe and allow law enforcement officers to do their jobs safely. What we have subsequently discovered is that when officers are masked up, it creates chaos. And genuinely, the community doesn't know who's who.
So off the top of my head, I can see another situation. In the last week, there was a church, I believe in Minnesota. I believe the pastor is an ICE agent himself. They were aware of who it was. People came in and took over the church because they had, somehow they had seen his face or badge number. They knew he was an ICE member. So they went in and took over that church during a ceremony. So you can see where the fear might be if maybe ICE does have policies of covering for a reason to protect their officers.
So I appreciate the question, and interfering with the law, with the practice of one's religion, I believe is already an offense. That's problematic. However, we have law enforcement officers here in New Hampshire that also are really active members in their faith communities. They coach our youth sports. They work at our food pantries. They hold side gigs, in other areas, and they are unmasked. They are known to the community, and masking does not make them or us safer. If it did, we might have tried this hundreds of years ago, but we don't. It doesn't make anyone safer.
Can I move on? Different question.
Sure.
The unmarked vehicles. I know it was either last year or the year before, a girl was murdered by an illegal alien who returned 2 or 3 times after he had been deported. And I know they used unmarked vehicles to go after him, so he wasn't alerted to their imminent arrival. So you had mentioned in here, just like the face mask, you also didn't want unmarked vehicles.
I did not.
Oh, I thought it was in the testimony in here.
No, it was mentioned in the testimony in the context, and that is not part of this bill.
Okay.
I have not requested that.
Okay, I
because
saw it in there.
We
I'm
know
sorry.
that our law enforcement
Very good.
do use unmarked vehicles successfully.
Different question.
Sure.
Cameras.
Yes.
We don't order all police. We have police towns that have police with no body cameras. So are you going to make sure we issue body cameras to fulfill your goal here?
That is not part of the legislation. The legislation addresses that no officer, it's line 11, no officer shall disable or disengage their body worn camera. It neither requires a department to acquire them if they don't have them, but if a department is using them, they shall not disable or disengage while they are working under a 287G contract.
Sure, Senator Reardon, you go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Altshuler, for taking my question. Is it your experience that right now our state police, our local police, do undercover or not necessarily in uniform work already in cases of drugs and gangs and things like that, and they have well-developed policies that guard them from being seen as a police officer?
Yes, and actually, again, on the back of the testimony is the QR code that will lead you. And the reason I did not print it out is because I think it's over 57 pages. I had a lot of links here because a lot of these documents were lengthy. So I saved a tree, and you can hyperlink through this QR code to our New Hampshire Law Enforcement Manual and see our policies related to that.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Put my second question first, 'cause I think it kind of mirrors the question that was asked previously. So if there is some local officer who's operating in an undercover capacity that's assisting federal officers, through the 287G program, my read of this would be, despite them acting in an undercover capacity, they would have to still display their badge.
So it is, I'm sorry, I'm unaware that any 287G operation, and again, the MOU is available through the hyperlink, but I happen to have a copy here. There's no undercover operations that are required for this agreement. That has not been asked of other law enforcement agencies, to the best of my knowledge. These have all been situations where they're going to arrest someone. And, purportedly someone in particular. So that's, our agency doesn't go undercover with ICE. We have our own undercover. We don't go undercover for immigration enforcement. The 287G is to assist ICE when they are in the state to move forward with a specific operation. So I'll give you an example. We collaborate with other law enforcement agencies, federal law enforcement agencies, frequently. One of them that I know you're familiar with because we worked on legislation back when we were both in the House, back in 2017. The Department of Homeland Security.
I wasn't in the House in 2017.
You didn't go in at 2017? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You were in criminal
Doesn't mean we
justice.
didn't work on legislation together.
Oh, all right. Well, then
That was
there we have, nonetheless, in 2017, we had a major human trafficking bust across 5 locations, 4 of them in New Hampshire. And that was a collaborative operation with the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the state police, and in those towns, municipal law enforcement, and some social service agencies too that were there to work with survivors. So there was like a lot of collaboration on this. 2 of the towns were Plastow, which I think is in your district, Senator. Yeah, no, you don't have Plastow. You have Plastow. It was you. That's why. Okay, it's Plastow, your now district, and Exeter, my district. And in those instances, that's a true collaborative effort with across agencies. And while the Department of Homeland Security was in charge of the entire operation, our law enforcement agencies, state and municipal, worked with them. No, they were not undercover for this operation. They were there for the tail end of it, for the arrests of the perpetrators. So that is similar to how this MOU plays out. So it's 10 pages of detail in how this rolls out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for taking my question.
Certainly.
So if a local officer is working with federal officers, and it's my understanding from your testimony that they're operating under the federal officers' rules or regulations when they do so. Was that?
Right. On page 5 of the MOU in section 11
I'm
called
asking about-
ICE supervision, they're under the supervision of the ICE officer during officer functions. Yes.
So what I understand is that the local officer is operating under the federal officer's policy.
Command.
So they don't have to follow their policy at all under a 287G agreement.
Well, and here's the rub, which is what brings us to this legislation, is that when ICE comes in to do an operation, should they ask our law enforcement to break policy that we have spent decades developing for the purposes of good community policing? That one operation where ICE can be under the control, have law enforcement under their control and command them to wear masks, cover their badge, turn off their body camera, cover their nameplate, that directly conflicts with our policies. And now, when we've got an officer who's running afoul of the New Hampshire policies, how do we justify that when ICE leaves town? We've just now taken steps to ruin the relationships that our local law enforcement officers have built, that our state police have built. And we have had setbacks, and we have had to come back from those. And it seems imprudent for the state of New Hampshire, who's invested so much time, critical incidents training and our police standards and training improvements, all of this. It takes a lot of time to train a law enforcement officer. It takes 42 days to train an ICE officer. And that 42-day trained ICE officer could possibly be in command and control of our local law enforcement and be masking and asking them to mask up and go against the policies that we have put in place to keep us all safe. They just don't jive with each other.
So last
Go
one.
ahead.
So how do we expect a local officer to assist the federal officers if, especially under the 287G program, if that local officer is not able to comply with the policies of the federal law enforcement agency?
So,
I guess it leads to.
yeah, thank you.
If they're not going to actually follow their policy, I'm not really sure how the local officer can provide meaningful support at the local level. So I'm just wondering how that would play out.
Well, I like I mentioned in a previous answer to a previous question, that in working with federal agencies, we have been able to do that, to collaborate and support each other through certain operations that span municipal, state, and federal jurisdiction. This particular agreement is not a collaboration. And so if the state of New Hampshire is going to put its policies into law, and we do have some policies in law about having your badge present. I mean, we have that as a law. This standardizes that. So should a agency, and I believe we have 13 now, wish to engage in a 287G, then they actually have to negotiate and put that in their agreement right now. So, I mean, that is how they would have to operate, is that there is no other federal agency that asks our state or municipal law enforcement in collaborative missions to violate policy or training provided by New Hampshire. No other federal agency asks that of us.
Senator, just a quick question. Same line of thought.
Yes.
Doesn't local law enforcement, the 13 groups that you've mentioned,
Yes.
sheriffs, whatever they are, don't you think they thought of this through at the beginning? So they signed up to work with ICE, and they knew the rules. They knew they'd be operating under their procedure. Don't you think they've already thought of this? And that you're sort of... So some communities have turned this down and said, we don't want to participate in this program. probably for a lot of the reasons you brought forth. So why are we stopping the 13 law enforcement agencies from doing what they appear to have knowingly signed into?
Right. Well, thank you for asking that so I can clarify. Under no circumstances am I asking through this legislation that any law enforcement agency or sheriff's department or the state police, which are, we have all three, the state police, a number of sheriff's departments, 1, 2, 3, 4 sheriff's departments, and then a whole bunch of municipal law enforcement agencies. This legislation does not impede any law enforcement agency from entering into a 287G agreement. That's not the purpose of this. It doesn't ask for that. It doesn't even go around the side door to get there. What it says is that all of these agencies train and have policies that we have already vetted and reformed multiple times over many decades. If you go to the last page of the law enforcement manual that is linked on the law enforcement manual, you will see the dates of every time it's been renewed and refreshed. And it takes over a year to do this because so many cross-state agencies are involved in this. So we've put in a lot of work to create a law enforcement community, both from the municipal up to the state level, that is designed to protect and serve. And we have made policy statements and put parameters in place to protect our citizens and to protect our law enforcement officers. If a federal agency is asking us to violate our own policies, then we need to put that into the MOU that we are not going to be violating our own state policies, or seriously think about whether our policies have any teeth to them.
So do you think possibly that, yes, we've created stuff looking at state municipal government, and so what works internally here, the feds are looking at a different problem. They're looking at, gangs that work worldwide, that so their officers and they're subject to different problems, possibly having someone come after them more so than in a town where my local law enforcement's doing one job, they're doing a federal law enforcement. We've seen around the country now, people know right away who the officers were involved in things. And they know it was these, right away, we know the 5 officers who were involved in the last shooting by name. And so I'm afraid that on the jobs they're doing on the federal level expose them to different dangers than our state officers are usually involved in. Again, a gang could come after someone, or a group could come after someone, like they went after the minister who's in his parish, and they broke into it and disrupted his congregation last week because people saw his face, they knew who he was, and they went after them. So I'm saying the risks and exposures now during these type of arrests are different, and you're exposing yourself. It's like on a national scale, people are aware of who you are.
Well, so
We can stop here.
yeah, but I
We've
mean,
talked it through.
respectfully, if a New Hampshire state police officer or a municipal law enforcement officer shot a woman in the face while her car was rolling, we would want to know who they are. If a New Hampshire state police officer or a New Hampshire municipal law enforcement officer shot a man 11 times while he was on his knees, we would want to know. But there's no circumstance under which the Granite Staters would want that person to be anonymous. And honestly, like, it hasn't hurt them. I'll tell you that. The person who shot Renee Good, according to Mr. Bovino, has already, in fact, I know since I've printed this testimony out, he has been replaced. But prior to that, Border Control Commander Greg Bovino said just this past weekend that the public will never learn the identity of Alex Pretty's murderer because that would, quote, be doxing. He says he has already gotten the agent out of Minnesota's jurisdiction and put him back on the job. That's not protecting anyone. That's a criminal cover-up.
So my point was, if I believe it's pronounced Trent de Aragua, if one of our officers was involved in arresting one of those gang members to deport them, they would be opening themselves up to a criminal element who could come after them. That would be the only reason.
If our officers were arresting a Trent de Aragua member here in the state of New Hampshire, then they would be doing that without a mask. If they're assisting ICE, that's then why would they do something different than if they were arresting that same person without ICE's intervention? We do good policing with our faces shown, our badges shown, our names visible, our body cameras on. We developed these policies and the reason for doing that to protect them and us. And it's in our policy manual.
Thank you. One more question for Senator.
Yes.
Chairman.
Thank you.
So in your testimony and in your response to questions, you mentioned it was unrelated to immigration, but it had to do with local law enforcement and federal officers working in collaboration that proved to be successful. When it comes to immigration enforcement, do you think having local collaboration is helpful to the federal officers enforce immigration laws?
That is non-germane, I think, because we have these agreements. It exists. It's something that we have. We have 13 agencies that have chosen to engage in this. My point is that if we are going to engage with federal agencies, which we do, and I'm not saying that we should choose one federal agency not to work with, because we work with a lot of federal agencies. We work with the ATF. There are no agencies that ask our state and our municipal law enforcement to cover their faces, cover their badges, turn off their body cameras, cover their names. None of them. Only ICE does that. And ICE is having some significant problems with their own mission, which is not just evidenced, but talked about by their own leadership. So why? Why? If this is an agency that's having some chaotic problems, that should be just common sense that maybe we want to give them a little space. But if we're going to engage in these MOUs, and we already have, and we have them in place, what we shouldn't be doing is jeopardizing our own law enforcement's community policing.
Senator?
Well, the examples you gave came from jurisdictions where the local law enforcement is not permitted to assist or provide any support in any way. So what I'm asking is, here in New Hampshire,
I'm sorry, what do you mean? Which ones?
the example you gave out of Minnesota, they're not permitted in Minneapolis to actually assist in any way. So there's no during these operations, there's no communication between local officers and federal officers. I'm asking, in New Hampshire, we don't allow there to be a blanket policy like that where there's no communication between the local law enforcement and federal officers. So I'm asking if you find that for the local officers to actually provide support to federal officers.
Right.
Is that helpful in their operations? And you gave an example where I believe it appeared to be very helpful.
Well, there have been and will continue to be many instances where federal agencies come to New Hampshire and ask for our assistance in operations. That is something that just exists. And with ICE, there has been developed a specific program with which to do this. So unlike with Homeland Security, with ATF, with some other agency that is on the top of my head right now, those are mission oriented, right? They're for specific missions. ICE is asking for a blanket MOU for whenever they come to town. So we have 13, 13 agencies that have decided to engage in this, and that's fine. That's the choice of those departments: Hillsborough County Sheriff, Rockingham County Sheriff, Candia Police, Carroll Police, Colebrook Police, Gorham Police, Ossipee Police, Pittsburgh Police, Troy Police, and Auburn Police Department, and the New Hampshire State Police. What this bill does is say that when you do that, because we have not had an incident with any other of these law enforcement federal agencies where they have asked us to violate our own policies. Never been asked that before. ICE is now asking that. And so what I'm saying is that let's get in front of that and protect our investment, protect our law enforcement, and make sure that everyone's clear that, yes, we do engage in assistance with these 287G agreements. However, we're not going to violate our own policies and laws to do it. It's inappropriate for a federal agency to ask law enforcement to violate their own policies and laws. We should, let's give this some real teeth.
We're all set. Thank you for your
Thank
testimony.
you.
David Tremblay. Tremble?
I'm just going to leave it on.
Afternoon, Mr. Tremble. You look like I did this morning after shoveling.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever have a long weekend shoveling?
You bet. It's been a lot of snow out
It
there.
has. It has.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is David Trumbull. I'm from the town of Ware, and I support this bill. And I have three reasons I'd like to support it. Overall, I think that the means and methods that ICE uses should comply with commonly accepted practices that are in place. This will ensure public trust and uphold the rule of law. First, the bill represents common sense policy. It was about 15 years ago that body cameras started being worn as a matter of practice in the United States. In 2013, 1/3 of law enforcement agencies were using them. In 2016, we were up to 50%. By 2020, up to 80%, including 100% of cities over 1 million people. In 2022, the New Hampshire State Police started using body cameras as a matter of rule, and that was done through the work of Governor Sununu and a commission. And the purpose of that rule was to increase public trust. Then in 2024, the New Hampshire Department of Corrections adopted the same rule. The purpose of the body cameras is to protect two groups. First is the public, and second is law enforcement. It protects the public so that whatever happens is recorded, and it protects law enforcement so that whatever happens is recorded. Also, the videos are made available and should be made available if we do an operation with ICE, if a complaint were to arise, and that would be under the New Hampshire Right to Know law, our constitutional right to know, and Freedom of Information Act. Nationally, multiple studies show that body cameras are beneficial. Studies from at least 4 different universities have shown that they reduce complaints against law enforcement by almost 20%. They reduce incidents of force and deadly force by 10%, and increase the sustained findings if a complaint were filed by 10%. They're effective. They increase trust, and they decrease the use of deadly force. Second, it will enhance specifically public trust for people of color. It is reaching the point in this country where ICE has arrived that people of color are unsafe to go about their daily lives, whether or not they are born in the United States and an American citizen, whether they're here as refugees, that means they're here legally, or they're here on a work visa, that means they're here legally. They now feel they have to carry their passport if they go to a public hearing at the State House, if they go to walk their dog around the block, go to the grocery store, take their child to school, or go to a box store to buy household appliances. We have seen far too many cases around the United States where people are arrested, people who are legally here, and then not released for hours or sometimes days. A small percentage of those who are arrested actually have any kind of criminal record, and even in a smaller percentage have a violent crime in their records. People of color are withdrawing from public life if they live in places where ICE has arrived, and there is fear in the community. New Hampshire is a welcoming state, and this bill will ensure that reasonable practices will continue where state and local law enforcement are involved with ICE operations. Third, this bill upholds the rule of law. It's not against the rule of law. It upholds the rule of law and best practices. You can't claim to uphold the rule of law saying you want to enforce immigration policy if the methods that you use actually undercut the rule of law. For example, body cameras again. As a matter of practice, they are used around the country and in New Hampshire. But ICE general rule is no body camera and yes, mask. This goes against commonly accepted practice. Another example is warrants. You've seen the internal ICE memo that said no judicial warrant is needed for ICE to go into someone's home. They say that non-judicial warrants are satisfactory. You will recall that before the American Revolution, non-judicial warrants were used, and that was part of the reason that led to the American Revolution. Numerous U.S. Supreme Court cases have upheld the need for judicial warrants and have held that a non-judicial warrant is not acceptable. Imagine this scenario. At your door, a masked man comes and says, "I want to come in." You say, "Where's your warrant?" They say, "We don't need a warrant." You ask if they have a body camera on. They say, "We don't need a body camera." You try to record it on your phone, and they tell you to put your phone away, or they tell you to get out of the way. This bill would protect people if this was a joint operation where there was assistance from local enforcement or state police or the county sheriff's office. That would not happen without there being a camera running. There would be somebody that person could go to and talk to that officer and say, "I know at least you're real because you have an ID. You are not covered with a mask." At the moment, federal policy is undermining federal public confidence in law enforcement and our belief that the United States is a nation of rules. We cannot change federal policy, but we should insist that when New Hampshire law enforcement is assisting ICE, that our law enforcement officers will follow the New Hampshire practices. The only answer to the current federal overreach is if the states stand up for the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. And I know you always answer the hard questions. It's always a pleasure to see you. You said in your testimony that people of color are they're afraid and they're carrying their passport around when they go in public.
No, I'm saying that they're
What
afraid
exactly-
that, oh, I'm sorry, go
What are
ahead.
you basing that on? Is that a study, a survey? What exactly are you basing that?
Thank you, Senator. It's nice to see you as well. And my point was that people of color will not go about their business without carrying their passport now, because this gives them an additional document to show that they are not only living here legally, maybe have a driver's license, but they have legal status to be in the United States. I don't carry my passport when I go out and do my regular affairs in the community, but people of color in communities where ICE has come, that is now becoming a common practice amongst people of color.
Paul?
I'm asking, you're making the statement that arrives at a conclusion. I'm asking, what do you what foundation do you have for that? What information are you relying on to even say that?
Okay, I thank you again, Senator, for the question. I don't have a study on that. I don't believe there's been a study done on that to give statistics, but there is numerous news reports that have documented that this is the case. And if you know people of color, you'll know who live in these areas that they will tell you that is happening too. So I guess you have to say it's anecdotal at this point, but there's enough anecdotes that it is not just occasional.
Thank you.
Senator Alshore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. Building on the question and answer exchange that you just had with my colleague, would you believe that George Reddy's in Iraq, a combat veteran and U.S. citizen, was driving to his job on July 10th of 2025 as a security officer at a farm in Southern California when he drove up on a protest. He was not part of the protest. He drove up on a protest. And after explaining to ICE agents that he was a US citizen trying to get to work, they smashed his car window, pepper sprayed him, dragged him out of his vehicle, kneeled on his neck and back, and detained him for 3 days without a phone call, access to a lawyer, or even a shower to wash off the pepper spray. He had no idea where he was, and he missed his daughter's 3rd birthday.
Senator,
Would you believe that that
If
is
you could
true?
Stop testifying. But go ahead, answer.
Senator Altshuler, thank you. I appreciate your testimony today. And I have heard that same story and dozens more like it in the news. That's not the only case of somebody who's legally here in the United States who has been picked up by ICE, and then after some period of time, hours or days, they say, oops, you actually have the right to be here, and then they just bring them back and drop them off on a street corner somewhere. That's it. That's not who we should be as a country. This bill does not eliminate ICE. It doesn't prevent any local law enforcement to deal with them. It just says these practices that we are doing now at the state police, Department of Corrections, because of the governor's commission, the purpose was to increase public trust. That's important. Body cameras work. That's why they're used almost universally. We shouldn't be going away from that. There's enough situations you see in the news now. The citizens around what happened are taking photos. If the police officers had their cameras on, if the ICE officers better had their cameras on, you would know exactly what happened.
Senator Ridden, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your testimony. Appreciate it. David Holt. Good afternoon, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of SB 623. And thank you for Senator Altshuler for this important bill. My name is David Holt. I'm a 3rd-generation immigrant. I was born here in New Hampshire and have lived in New Hampshire the majority of my life. Currently own a home in Somersworth, New Hampshire, and I am testifying on my own behalf. SB 623 is a simple, common-sense transparency bill. It does not prohibit immigration enforcement, and it does not prevent cooperation with federal authorities. What it does is ensure that when state or local officers assist in immigration enforcement, they do so openly, visibly, and accountably. Requiring officers to display their name or badge number, refrain from masking their identity, and use body-worn cameras protects everyone involved. It protects residents' civil rights. It protects officers from false allegations, and it protects the integrity of the state. Research and experience consistently show that anonymized law enforcement creates fear in the public. When people cannot tell who is exercising government power, communities become less likely to report crimes, to cooperate as witnesses, or to seek help from the police. That fear undermines public safety for everyone, citizens, immigrants, and law enforcement alike. Transparency, on the other hand, builds trust. Clearly identifiable officers signal lawful authority and accountability. That trust is essential, especially in sensitive contexts like immigration enforcement, where fear can spread quickly and silence entire communities. New Hampshire has a strong tradition of open government and accountable policing. We do not allow secret laws or secret courts, and we should not allow secret policing. SB 623 affirms a basic democratic principle. When the government exercises power over people, it must do so openly and responsibly. I'd like to also please bring up again the note of the tragic and unnecessary and wrongful deaths that we have seen in the last few weeks, which only highlights the training and control needed over these enforcement officers. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'm asking you to support SB 623 and to vote to pass.
Thank you very much for coming in today. Questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in. Executive Counselor Karen Yote. Yeah. I'm sorry I called you last. I didn't mean to. They gave me 2 different forms. I would have called you first, but
It's quite
I
all
got the
right.
other form first. My apologies.
My commute from my office is pretty easy. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Senators of Judiciary Committee. New Hampshire law requires police officers on active duty to wear a visible name tag on their uniform that shows their name. In 2021, the Executive Council approved a $3.4 million contract to equip New Hampshire State Troopers with body-worn cameras. This was done at the recommendation of LEACT, which had been convened by Governor Sununu. SB 623 addresses an urgent need for clarity when New Hampshire law enforcement officers act in cooperation with federal immigration enforcement, particularly in 287G agreements. Recent immigration officer-involved killings, often carried out by masked officers without visible identification, have deeply shaken public trust, including here in New Hampshire. SB 623 responds directly to that concern by requiring officers to clearly identify themselves, prohibiting the use of face-covering masks, and ensuring body-worn cameras are activated. These are basic common-sense safeguards that protect the public, protect officers who are acting lawfully, and strengthen confidence in the rule of law. Accountability is not anti-law enforcement. It's essential to legitimacy and public safety. For these reasons, I respectfully urge the committee to support SB 623. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. Just a quick one, which I've asked earlier. So if it, and I won't pronounce it right, Trent de la Ragra? The gang.
I do not know. I do not know the
Again,
pronunciation of that, but I know of
South
what you're
American
referring.
Mexican gang, who are very dangerous. So if they were going after one of their gang members to arrest and deport them on a detainer notice, could you see that maybe, because this gang is notorious for going after people, officers, people who go against them, might there be an instance there where you would say, geez, we don't want it out on the news that, Bill Gannon was the officer, and my life and my family's life might be in danger then. So for the safety of law enforcement, might there be circumstances that would warrant wearing a mask and coming up and then also, I'll just give you the whole thing at once. So if I have a undisclosed, I have a vehicle that has non-identifying, so is that okay in this circumstance? So I don't give a heads up to the people who we're assuming they're bad actors in this house we're pulling up to. It gives us the element of surprise to get to the door, to have masks on to protect them. Can I have an unmarked vehicle and masks in that circumstance?
I understand your question. Thank you for your question. There are in our current law exceptions to the requirement that New Hampshire law enforcement officers have to be identified. And I think those were referenced earlier, that there are exceptions when police officers have to be undercover, for example. And so I think having a particular exception that could be crafted to address certain exceptionally risky circumstances, perhaps that would be warranted, and that's something that could be added as an amendment to this or laid out in rules, whatever the appropriate way to effectuate that would be. In New Hampshire, the public has an expectation that our New Hampshire law enforcement, our New Hampshire credentialed law enforcement will be identified with those particular exceptions set aside. That is the expectation that our public has. And so I think that this is exactly the reason why, if in fact there are going to be certain times when law enforcement officers that have New Hampshire credentials are going to not be following what our laws are, those exceptions should be laid out so that the public understands under exactly what circumstances New Hampshire credentialed law enforcement officers will not be identifiable. So I think this law, there is some uncertainty at this time, particularly with regard to the 287G agreements. And I think it's important for the public that we establish clarity on that.
Wouldn't you think that the 13 law enforcement agencies that have signed up considered this? Because a lot of towns have turned it down, didn't want to do it. But the 13 agencies that have said they do want to cooperate, municipal sheriffs, whoever else, I'm not thinking state police, whoever else, haven't they already considered those things? And aren't we getting in the way? They've said they want to participate in the ICE thing. I assume they know that they're going to be working under federal law in executing this. So why are we interfering with something that it seems to be, there are exceptions and there have been problems in the last few weeks. There have been tens of thousands of criminal illegals deported using this program. So yes, we're broken some, there have been some terrible tragedies, but in general, you could anecdotally, go and look at tens of thousands of successful deportations. So why aren't these agencies capable, that the 13 agencies, of making their own call and following federal?
Thank you. There have not been tens of thousands of people deported from New Hampshire. New Hampshire law enforcement, these agreements that we have, these 287G agreements, are relatively new. And yes, there are 13 communities that have, or entities that have entered into them. But these are not, this is not something that law enforcement in New Hampshire has been working. Law enforcement in New Hampshire has not been enforcing immigration law. That has not been their primary objectives. That is not what their primary training is about. That's not what our police standards have been about. And so this is a relatively new area, and it's one of the reasons why, even though there are communities that have moved forward with it, that when we know better, we do better. When we identify an area that could benefit from clarity, then it's our responsibility to do something about that. I was a city councilor in Lebanon, the great city of Lebanon, for 20 years, serving over much of that time with one of your colleagues, Senator Prentice. And during that time, the city of Lebanon Police Department adopted body-worn cameras. We also require identification, that we have a lot of protocols that are well developed over time. And what we have found is that the use of body-worn cameras, identification, they allow for the public, for public trust, and they allow for greater accountability and greater safety for both the public and the law enforcement officers.
Just a quick question. You were one of the cities that was sanctuaries. You had a sanctuary city ordinance, is that correct?
Well, we were one of the cities in Lebanon. We had adopted, I was the chair of the task force on the fair and impartial policing, where we updated our standards to make it clear after a citizen referendum that we did not have the resources for our local property taxpayer dollars to be used to implement federal immigration law. And so we did update our ordinances to comply with a citizen referendum. That ordinance has now been further updated to comply with state law.
Thank you.
Counselor, it's good to see you again. I understand what you're saying here, but I'm looking at the requirements that they either their name or their badge number, and they cannot wear any kind of facial covering or mask, which to me is like with the below degree temperature, that it makes sense that they should be able to wear that just to keep warm. But one of the problems that we're seeing is that a lot of these law enforcement officers that are engaging in this kind of work, they're being identified and their names are going out there, and many of them are getting doxxed. Many of them are getting death threats through emails. Their families are being threatened. Do you believe that there should be enhanced penalties for individuals that dox our law enforcement officers for the purpose of harassment?
Well, that is a good question. I think that is not addressed specifically in this. That would be addressed in potentially different legislation. I think that what the question highlights, though, is the difficult position that we're putting our law enforcement officers here in New Hampshire in. In New Hampshire, law enforcement officers are required. They are required to identify themselves. Mm-hmm. And here we have a situation now where 13 entities in the state are potentially putting their law enforcement officers at exposure for ambiguity, and putting them in difficult situations where they might not know what is required of them in a particular circumstance. And I think that it's really on us. We expect law enforcement officers in New Hampshire to follow New Hampshire law, and it's our job, I think, to make it as clear as possible to to them so that they can comply with our Constitution and with our state laws. And so in this case where we have this agreement and it is a little bit of a gray area, are they complying with the ICE? Do they, when they're under ICE supervision, do they have a different standard that they comply with? Do they have different training then that they have to meet that standard? Do they have a different uniform that they're supposed to be wearing? There are a lot of questions that get raised when these questions of who is the commanding, who are they reporting to? I think that we have raised some real ambiguities there with these 13 agreements between institutions in New Hampshire and federal law enforcement. So I think all the more reason that we need some clarity, and I think this bill could be a vehicle.
Thank you for that response, but I don't believe you answered the question, and I think it probably should be a part of this if you're talking about the Granite State No Anonymity Immigration Enforcement Act, that you have to protect the police officers or anybody who is putting their life on the line to do their job. And if their identity is out there and they are being harassed, they're being threatened, they're being, many of them have received death threats, their families, we know where you live kind of thing. Do you believe that there should be enhanced penalties for people that engage in that kind of behavior?
I understand your question and I appreciate your concern for the law enforcement officers. It's not something that I've given thought to, and so I wouldn't want to speak out of turn.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in today. Good to see you.
Right. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the bill? Seeing none, I will. We're gonna take 10-minute break till 10 after. Everyone go to the computer. So for that one. Yes. On the we're going next week. We're gonna do 7.
Yeah, look at, you're already in your coat. You're all set to roll.
You're happy, we're not gonna, can't help it.
Motion to go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We're there. Okay, we're gonna start off with 460. I have an ought to pass motion. Senator Abbas seconds. And that was the loitering or around the schools. Senator Reardon, we talked about it a little bit, not just schools, it was also churches, childcare facilities. I was a little tentative with the words knowingly appears and warrant for alarm, what those mean, but overall, I'm happy with the bill. I wish we could have been a little more precise, but otherwise, I think it's okay. Comments? All in favor of the ought to pass motion? Aye. Motion for consent? So moved. Second by Senator Abbas. And all in favor of the consent motion? Aye.
So who's gonna do it?
Senator Reardon, want to take this up? Thank you.
Brendan, don't forget there's some signing sheet up here.
I'm making an ought to pass motion on 461. Senator Abbas is seconding. Any discussion? It was defining hemp and Delta 9 stuff. I think we're just going in line with the federal definition. If anyone else has other thoughts? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Motion for consent?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Oh, I forgot I had new members. Do you have those?
Yep.
If we handed them out to everyone? And remind me why I was amending this. Was the definition?
It was federal.
It's federal. Thank you, Simon. It was you on that one. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion to
Yes.
reconsider the ought
Yes.
to pass?
Thank you. All in favor of the reconsideration? Aye. I apologize, forgot about this. Simon, you're right there. I should have thought of that.
So now, I'll make a motion of ought
Yes.
to pass.
Yes.
And then, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. And I want to introduce amendment.
Second.
I'm seconding, you're reintroducing. Now I'm going to make,
You offer an amendment.
I'm offering amendment 0267, which I think, Simon, do you want to come up and clarify, or is it just a clear definition? Okay. Thank you for the second. Okay, all in favor of the amendment 0267? Aye. All in favor of the bill as amended?
Make a motion of ought to pass
As amended, thank you. So thank you. All in favor of the motion to pass as amended? Aye.
Second.
All in favor of the consent motion?
Aye.
Aye. Senator Abbas, you want to take it up? Sure, no, I can, no, okay.
It's your amendment.
It's my amendment, so, okay, I'll take it up. That was 461. Thank you. Thank you, Simon, for reminding me. Okay, on 463, I'm making an ITL motion. Do I have a second? I don't think it's going to make, real briefly today, SP 463, I don't think is going to make schools any safer. And we'll just leave it there for today. We'll go into more depth later. Senator Oshler, comments?
Yeah, it's worth noting that 272 people signed in support and only 41 signed in opposition. And that if we don't make some incremental changes when we have the opportunity to, we leave ourselves wide open, and it's time to take some gun violence prevention action. This would be a good start.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Reardon.
Thank you. I would also like to note that having this on the books would give law enforcement the opportunity to identify and stop somebody that they knew had nefarious reasons to bringing a firearm towards the school. And I think it's great to give law enforcement all the tools that they need.
Thank you, Senator. All in favor of the ITL motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
I can take it out.
Okay, Senator Abbas will take it out. Okay, SB 555, I was making a motion of ITL.
Oh,
So,
I think I beat you to it, though.
well, I was in my sentence, so I'm gonna still live with mine.
Second that motion.
Thank you, Senator.
ITL.
Discussion?
Yeah, this is an excellent, excellent bill because every year that we don't do this, more bodies pile up. And I don't know what it's going to take for this legislature to, see these people and see how necessary it is to give families and law enforcement an opportunity to avert disaster and avert tragedy.
Thank you. Senator Reardon?
Yeah, I will agree with that, and further that not only does it give law enforcement and families that kind of relief, but it also has a really clear appeal process to get a gun back in the event that guns are taken away.
Thank you. My only
And-
comment, are we going further? I'm sorry.
And the New Hampshire people who signed in support this 3-1.
Okay, I see it as a violation of the individual gun owner's rights, and we'll go further when we're on the floor. All in favor of the ITL motion? Aye. 3-2, I'll take it out.
We do get to vote.
We get,
Oh,
you're supposed
I thought-
to.
Yeah,
Oh,
learn
sorry.
that.
I said, all in favor of my ITL motion? Aye. Opposed?
No,
No, I put the noes. Sorry. And I'll take it out. Sure.
I can take that one. I'll take that one. Thank you.
Okay, I'm making an ITL motion on 651. Do I have a second?
Second.
And it was, I'll sum it up, it was legalizing marijuana. And comments,
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Senator Abbas.
In reading through the bill, I will say there was some really good parts of this bill, which
If you didn't write it yourself,
because
almost.
I'm pretty sure I wrote many parts of this myself. Yeah, I was really involved in that process. So this is going in the right direction, but I don't think this is quite there yet. Smoking in public is just a violation. That was not in any legislation I've ever supported. I think that's one of the biggest complaints you'll ever hear about any state that's ever allowed recreational cannabis is the public use of it. If you go to any of those states, it is everywhere. Making it a $50 violation, I don't think that gives it any teeth or meaningful, enforcement. And I think, for me, I've always had a problem with that. I know other people who've supported policies like this in the past won't support it because of this. I'm not the only one. That is a big deal to a lot of people. It's certainly not asking much from the people who have reservations about recreational cannabis.
what page is that? Oh,
Public use provision,
page what?
off the top of my head, I do not recall.
Oh, okay, I thought you were on a particular
It's-
page,
it's a-
sorry,
It's a
Sorry.
short paragraph.
Yeah.
Also,
gotcha.
I think that there is, when it comes to the dual licensing part, I always have reservations about that. How they want to mix them. I think no one should have a unfair advantage in getting these. We don't want to, it should be open bidding. So that's another problem I have.
Okay. Senator Reardon?
Oh, they had their chance.
Nope. Senator, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Senator Abbas, would you entertain a committee amendment to correct
No,
that usage for a different type of fine structure?
no.
I would not. They had their chance.
They had their chance.
Anyways, we would not. Thank you, though. All in favor of the ITL motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nope.
I'll take it up. Or we might switch one of the other bills.
We can take it out.
Okay. And that was 651, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what I did with my file, but I got, 479 I have here, and I am I'm making an ITL motion.
479. Wait.
479, was that last week?
You're going up.
I'm sorry.
It was not,
I think we changed, we called an audible.
79.
Yeah, beforehand, we weren't gonna do that. We
Oh,
had,
alternative treatment centers, okay. Yes.
I didn't like it because initially we had set them up and it was only them, and they promised years ago, I remember Matt Simon standing there, we're never gonna wanna sell for a profit. And now they do. So other people brought to my attention would be creating monopoly. So for that and other reasons, I have an ITL motion, which I seconded.
I would second that.
Thank you. Comments? Senator Reardon.
I thought we heard thoughtful testimony about the ability to gain financing from certain entities that would finance a for-profit business, and that, in fact, the gentleman that was testifying had said he had done personal guarantees before. And I might just add that we create monopolies all the time. Our liquor industry, with limiting the number of distributorships that are out there, is a monopoly.
One thing I didn't like, we have no ability to look at their books right now, correct? Remember they came in today and I'm like, you're making a profit, what do you need? And they didn't really have the books available to us. And so that was like, so I don't know how much of a necessity it is for them to stay afloat, to sell for a profit. I don't know what the profit number is.
So I think the testimony was that they put everything back into their business right now. They're not at a position where they're making a profit. They're putting it back into security requirements and things like that. There's a million businesses in the state of New Hampshire that we've never looked at their books, but if it's somebody that we're regulating, we could definitely ask for that in our, we could ask them to submit financials to some state agency that I'm sure has the time to look at those. And if somebody's going for bank financing, any kind of financing, you know that they have to submit all of their profit and loss statements, their books for the year. So I think their real desire was cheaper financing that would make their businesses more profitable.
Okay, anyways, I'm gonna live with, oh, go ahead, Senator. I'm sorry.
Just for some food for thought. There's, what, 7 therapeutic cannabis locations?
Yep, owned by 3 different entities.
Three owners, but there's 7 locations where a therapeutic patient could go. And if we were to pass this, would the law still only permit 7 therapeutic locations?
If it's a policy decision, that's up to us to decide, right?
And there wasn't any testimony that to expand the amount of locations, expand it more than 3 owners. Right? So basically 3 entities or 3, I want to say individuals, I'm not sure, individually owned. Basically 3 entities would control the entire market.
Are there 3 entities because we decided in legislation that there's 3 entities?
I'm not sure. That was before my time in the legislature. I know when they came before the legislature, it was heavily lobbied for, and part of that lobbying was to be these not-for-profit. Now they want to change it. So they want to change that, which I certainly understand. I can appreciate why. It sounds like it's a great financial incentive to do so. But all the other conditions that went along with them being nonprofits stay, but they're not-for-profit. I mean, to me, I think you would have to revamp the whole program for me to support something.
I think we would have to revisit whether they made the proposal to be nonprofits or if the legislature required them to be a nonprofit in order to approve them. I think that's an important distinction there.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Being kind of an old timer, I remember when we went through this, and it was a condition they agreed to even get started. There was a lot of consternation because at the time, you didn't have a lot of ATCs around the country engaging in medicinal marijuana, except in states where they had actually legalized it. And at that time, there were very few states. So the state wanted to make sure they had a really tight control. And so it wasn't only that, there was a very small list of conditions that it could be prescribed for, and there was a lot of talk, and there was legislation that said, you know, the person had to be a New Hampshire doctor, they had to see them a number of times. You couldn't have some out-of-state doctor prescribing for a New Hampshire person. So I think there was a lot of controls put into, but again, it was that they had to be not for profit. So.
Yep, and that's consistent with what I've heard is the history of this, that
Yeah.
it was a condition that the legislature
Yes.
required of them. They didn't think of that on their own, but it sounds like with what it's prescribed for, what the business model is
Yeah.
now, we have some history, we have books that we can look at. It's probably not fair to just close the door on them being being a for-profit entity. Instead of ITL, maybe we should interim study, or we should create a study committee that's going to look at all of those factors as opposed to just saying no.
Okay, I think there was an opportunity last term to legalize marijuana, but the House and the Senate, and there were senators here that worked very, very hard on it, and it failed. And so I think that we can try, I mean, ITLing it, but to go as far as studying it yet again, there's the reports that were done last year, not last year in 25, in 24, that I think would be a good starting place. But unless we include the ability for people to grow their own, it's not going to pass.
So I might just say, I'm not having this conversation about legalizing marijuana for
Right.
recreational use. I'm just talking about alternative treatment centers.
If I may follow up too, and I believe I had mentioned during the public hearing that we had agreed in the beginning to a very small number of them, but we kept hearing from constituents from across the state that were saying how difficult it was to get there. It wasn't like a 15-minute trip down to your local CVS pharmacy. So we started authorizing more ATCs. So I'm not sure of the exact number we have here in the state, but if we're looking at taking away their not-for-profit and making them for-profit, I think that's a totally different conversation. And I mean, we'd have to look at their licensure. You sit on ED&A as well. We'd have to come up with a new type of license. So I just don't think it's as easy as what people think it would be. And I don't even think a study committee would be able to do it. I think it's going to be a long process.
Senator Abbas.
And just to touch on that subject, when you allow, let's say, a recreational policy to go forward, that's a time where most legislation on that topic has provision to make them for profit. But it's a major shift in the market. It's expanding the amount of enterprise in the. I think with only having 3 with 7 locations to do that, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. And that's why the monopoly word may come up.
Again, I'm not invoking recreational use into this or whatever model that's going to be. I think that is, there are just some choices for the legislature to make about what that model is. I'm only talking about the ATCs that exist right now. Oh, there's only 3 owners, there's only 7 locations, and the viability of those is dependent on what it costs them to do business. And that's what they're asking for, is to become an entity that has a lower cost of doing business than a nonprofit does. I've worked for nonprofits. They're a different beast. They don't get all of the benefits of being a for-profit and the ability to take investments, get loans.
Oh, I totally
grants,
agree.
any of those kinds
There's
of
a
things,
lot
yeah.
of benefits, but I think by only having, 3 players in the industry, we're running into that monopoly lane. We got to be careful, because what will likely happen is they may be fine with it, but there are impending lawsuits. I'm sure you will come our direction when you have that type of system in place. I think we got, when I see you doing it in more of a comprehensive policy, which I believe my colleague was referencing, it's a simple studying just this one issue. It might be too much.
So we should encourage the the alternative treatment centers to come back to us with a model of what the framework would be for a for-profit entity, and to look at expanding that to others than those that have existing.
Sounds like it would be
Licenses.
persuasive testimony if they had that information available.
At the moment, we're still on 479. I have a motion to ITL. All in favor of the ITL motion? Aye. Opposed, any?
No,
Okay.
Take it out.
Okay, Senator Abels will take it out. Did we vote on it? All in favor? Did we do that? Aye.
we just
I'm
did.
tired.
Yep.
Okay. Senator Abels will take it out, and we have one more. I'm sorry. SB 512, relative to the fees and criminal records related to charges that do not result in conviction.
Motion to interim study?
Second. Discussion?
What's the motion?
Interim study. It was Senator Murphy's bill.
So may I ask why? What is
Sure.
left to study? Yeah, I'm just curious what we're gonna go into.
Well, I think, an interim study, I don't think we should close the door on the conversation, but I think the bill as it's written isn't quite ready for prime time.
Costs would be one thing.
There is that. And there is a funding issue right there. This is something that someone applies to the court for. There's a lot of things that apply for through the court has a filing fee. And in these circumstances, again, it's a procedure that someone goes through, there's a filing fee. That's not uncommon in court.
I guess I'm confused about it. So the issue that you want to look into further is the size of the fee? Or,
No, because someone's found not guilty for whatever reason, or if the prosecutor decides that they don't want to continue advancing the case and they want to move to dismissal, which that's not the court's not at fault that someone filed charges and someone's found not guilty. They administer the justice, and that is it. In this case, because someone's found not guilty, I certainly agree with the concept they should be eligible for an annulment of that charge. But to waive the fee, the court they're now losing that which covers the administrative costs. And when this was my first term in the House, I remember we had a bill on waiving the filing fee on this very subject. Not the same because someone's simply found not guilty. Back in 2019, I want to say, the cost was around $80 in administrative costs. So they may make an argument you should increase the fee at this point. Never mind, get rid of it. And I'm not saying we increase it. There's not someone from the court here providing testimony, but just based on that alone, there is an administrative cost to this. Yeah, when you annul a case, you have to it's as if it never happens. That whole file has to be removed from any, can't be accessible online. It's now no longer open to the public, so someone can't go to the courthouse and get the file. There's a lot of work that actually goes into that. So in order to do that, there is an administrative cost. And it is a benefit to someone to do it. And there are a lot of circumstances where the court may waive filing. Right? We don't need to get into all that. I'm just saying to simply mandate it be removed. I don't think now is the right time to do that.
Mr. Lehman, did you have any other thoughts, or did he sum it up well?
Well, certainly from the administrative, that's purely
Yep.
for you all to decide about where you want to place administrative burdens and under what circumstances. But just as in terms of the way the amendment is written, as it's presented, it says that the court will waive the filing fee for a petitioner upon the demonstration of some things. And typically when you go to court, you pay the filing fee, you get into court, and then you start demonstrating or proving things. So it's not really clear how the court would know to waive a filing fee just to enter the request for the annulment before taking up the substantive question of whether the person qualifies for the annulment. I think it could be fixed if somebody put their mind to it, but as it's written now, it's
it sort of puts the cart before the horse.
Thank you very much. Senator
So I'm just doing the plain reading of this without, I don't think, overthinking it. The court shall waive the filing fee for a petitioner that demonstrates he or she has been found not guilty. Generally, you have an order that says your case is dismissed, not guilty, not
But
prosecuted.
it's not demonstrated when you make the filing, when you file the petition. You haven't demonstrated anything. The determination of whether your petition demonstrates those facts comes after you paid the filing fee and the filing's been accepted by the clerk.
You would be asking the clerk's office at the court to make that determination when, even if it's obvious, and even if they have the certified copy of the not guilty verdict or not, in that courthouse, it's still done in the courtroom, not by the office. So but to file it in the first place is when you pay the money, the filing fee. Once that's done, then they send it up to the court. You make them, basically you're asking the clerk's office to make the determination who's eligible for the annulment when it's technically the court, the judge would make that determination.
So if I have a landlord-tenant matter and the tenant and I agree that they're going to leave on a certain date, and I filed that with the court, that case is dismissed without me ever doing anything else, appearing or proving or anything. The clerk is making a decision in that case to take that paperwork, put it in the file, and that case goes away. So why is it any different than me putting a copy of whatever the finding was in that case?
2 reasons. The first reason is that presumably as landlord, you're the defendant in the case. So somebody's already initiated the case in court by filing a petition.
I was
pending
thinking I was doing an eviction. I was the landlord was the plaintiff and the tenant agrees to leave.
You've started an eviction, which means the filing is the clerk has accepted it, docketed it, and it gets before a judge to take some sort of action. That's the correct process to be followed. Here, well, I think you said the clerk just does it. The clerk doesn't issue an order granting an annulment. The judge has to do that. The clerk accepts the file, dockets it, and then it goes off to a judge to make a determination one way or another based on whatever is presented in the petition. So.
And I don't pay a fee for that. So
They do.
I pay a fee to file the case,
Right.
just as this person, there would be, the county attorney's office would do some kind of filing. But to dismiss that case, to annul that case, I'm not paying a fee to have that done. I'm just handing over the paperwork that it's been settled. We don't need any more court action.
So that's not if you're a plaintiff and you bring the case and then you decide to dismiss it, first of all, you can't always voluntarily dismiss the case either. So
If I
there are
enter a
circumstances-
settlement agreement, then the court is not going to the court's going to cancel the hearing for that.
No, I think what she's saying is the case was filed by the prosecutor in the first instance, and this is a pleading filed in the case. Separate from that, I think that might be a fair point.
Yeah, yes, but I'm just explaining, you can't dismiss, you're asking it be dismissed in this case.
Correct, and I'm not paying a filing fee to do that.
Correct.
They're just, it's administrative from that point. And I'm asking why this isn't treated the same. This is just administrative. I'm gonna file something to ask this to be annulled, and I'm gonna give you whatever the court has issued to say that
The difference
it's
is
dismissed.
when you file that initially, there's a filing fee. County attorneys don't file filing fees when they file criminal charges.
Right.
So there is still a fee being paid to the court, just as being paid. I'm not sure what the policy reason is for not having a cost for dismissal. Probably because in civil cases, they encourage resolution. They want to maybe charge the parties to dismiss it. They don't want to encourage resolution.
Well,
My
I think we do in criminal cases too, right? How many, 80% of county cases are pled. They're not, is it higher than that even? They don't go to court, but we always encourage settlement between the parties to agree. I don't know, this seems fair. From the position of somebody who has maybe been wrongly accused or there wasn't enough evidence to actually convict them, it seems fair to not have them have to pay to get rid of the insult.
Yeah, I can assure you this, there are circumstances where people are wrongfully charged, and there are circumstances where someone's found not guilty, and that's just the
It
outcome.
depends on how good their lawyer is.
That's the outcome of the case. So I understand what you're saying, that someone who's been wrongfully accused. I appreciate that. I'm just explaining there's a lot of administrative obligations that happen thereafter that comes at an expense. Maybe in a budget year, this is something that we would consider an HB2 style bill. I think this,
I don't think equity should depend on whether it's a
Hence-
budget year.
hence the interim study is why I said, I don't think this is a policy we should close the door on, but I think right now.
I'm done.
My legal scholars, she understands, I think, the point, right?
Yeah,
We just disagree.
well, so it's interesting because the form to file for an annulment is called a petition for an annulment. You don't generally file petitions inside of existing cases. And I don't know if the petition for annulment gets filed with a docket number that was under the original criminal charges or not. I just don't know. It's possible that it does. It's possible that it doesn't. But I think you raise a fair point in terms of the file, there being a file between the state and the defendant that already exists at the time the person seeks an annulment. I think that's a fair point.
I understood your equity point the whole way, but
We disagree.
And I'm not going to tell you what's fair. That's not for me over here to chime in on.
I think I'll be, if we look at it a little longer. Anyways, I'm gonna go with the interim study instead. All in favor of the interim study on 512? Aye. Opposed?
Nope.
Gerald, you take this one up? Barry, do you have to work today?
I can do it.
Okay, thank you.
Keeps me focused, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. No, that was very good. Motion to come out of executive session. Okay. All in favor? Thank you, guys.
Plaintiff's rights, and it was one of the, we settled with the defendant.
Civil, criminal.
Yes. And